Hi Simon.
Hi.
So we're here in Derby.
Yep.
What's it like being vegan in Derby?
It's okay. I don't suppose it's any different to anywhere else in the country. There are not that many vegan places actually. If you want to get vegan, you just have to ask for it. If you're in a restaurant or somewhere like that, it's not really a problem. It's not an issue. Derby is pretty good for the arts though. There's loads going on. Quite a few open-minded people.
Yeah.
Not that many vegans here, I have to say though. So I'm a little bit isolated, but I'm certainly not the only one. And there's a great cafe here, Yaffle Cafe, which is good, as you know.
Yeah.
That's totally vegan. I think it's totally vegan. They do really good food. And it's just on top of a health food shop. So there's great whole food, vegan, veggie supplies. So that's a good point of call. Yeah.
Do you think it's a challenge when you're isolated from other vegans?
Well, I actually don't know that many vegans, so it's not really a challenge. I think it's easy, really.
Yeah.
It's not a big issue. But I would like to know more vegans. So I think they're as varied as any other section of society, really. I don't think it necessarily defines a person just because they identify with being a vegan. It's more a lifestyle choice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if a community of vegans came together in Derby, that'd be great. Yeah. I'll probably go along and sit at the back.
So what are your hobbies and interests?
Psychology. Very interested in psychology. Hobbies, I suppose. My hobby at the moment that occupies me the most is playing the Indian flute. It's a thing called a bansuri. It's a bamboo flute. It's a traditional instrument, thousands of years old. Extremely hard to play, especially if you've got fat fingers like me. So I'm learning that, and that's really exciting. It's not necessarily something I'm gifted at. I used to be in a band, sing and play bass guitar, but that was 20 odd years ago. So the bansuri, the Indian flute, is kind of me being a little bit creative, or trying to be.
What made you want to play that instrument?
I don't know, I just love the sound. I just love the sound of it. It's very chilled out, relaxing type of sound. It's all natural. It's very, when you pick up a bansuri, you're connected to the heritage of the instrument. It's I don't know, there's just something sort of meditative about it. You're picking up a lot of history.
Yeah.
I'm not big into the spiritual side of life, but there's something about that instrument that sets it apart. There's a lot of history behind it. So for me, it's a meaningful instrument. So it's either that or the harmonica.
You said you're interested in psychology.
Yeah.
So do you think psychology could be applied to vegan outreach and promoting veganism more than it is now?
Yeah, I think so. I think you have to be careful about academic psychology and pop psychology, because they're two very different things. But an insight into what drives people in terms of how they identify with various elements of their life, their beliefs, what motivates them to behaviour, what they consider to be normal or not normal, and their development. All of this is appropriate for psychology to question. We see in people's everyday lives that actually, they're not influenced too much by their genes. It's mainly an environment. Not the whole story, of course. It's not a nature-nurture thing. But psychology can contribute to those important questions about what drives people to do certain things under certain circumstances. So with the vegan question, really important. Is there much research out there? No. There's hardly any. That which does exist isn't really at the forefront of psychology. So it's a very small part. It's more there's more papers, academic journal papers on nutrition than, say, animal welfare or the meat and dairy industry, and the counter sort of to that. So obviously there's a big advocacy group for animal welfare, veganism, but not in formal academic circles.
What did your family and friends think when you went vegan?
Well, they thought I was a nutter. Well, it's preceded, as it is with many people, by years and years of vegetarianism. So I was always like the person that sat outside of the norm, as it were, that they had to cater for. They had to do side dishes for, or something different. So I was always trouble. But when I went vegan, it was kind of, so what you mean? You don't eat fish still? The lack of understanding of what veganism was lacking a lot of the time for some people. So there's very few people that I've found know exactly what veganism is. So so you don't wear leather, so you don't don't do this, don't do that. What about this? Trying to find the little exceptions to it. So it's more I'm forced into that position of saying, well, it's this but not that, it's this and not that. It means nothing to do with animals at all, not even like that. And I think the hardest thing for people to accept, from my experience, is so you don't eat cheese? Cheese is in everything. It's in everything. They stick it in so many foods. I think for new vegans, that's the difficult bit, for them to find out what dairy isn't in. So for my family, preparing meals, if they want to, if they given the choice, I'd rather cook. It's a bit of a journey for us all. Me and dealing with them, and them dealing with me.
So how do you think we can normalise veganism?
Normalizing veganism, it's a big challenge, absolutely. It needs to happen. I think when people realise that it's actually the natural way to be, it's not natural to kill loads of animals in the fashion that we do, or any other way actually. Normalizing veganism means that it has to come mainstream, so it doesn't sound or seem odd, and that places cater for people that want to eat and be vegans in that way. But for me, almost like the eating vegan is about the least interesting bit of it. It's not, for me, it's not about that. It's not about the health, although there are massive health benefits, as anyone who looks into this will tell you and find out for themselves. For me, normalizing veganism means it's about having compassion introduced into people's daily lives. So when they do things, they think about the consequences of them. When they buy a pair of shoes, that has a consequence. When they order a certain meal, that has a consequence. Even when they talk with other people, that has a consequence. The words you choose, the attitude, the tone of your voice, all has a consequence. The message you put across. And I think all the time we're seeing vegan as odd or out there, we're kind of alienating people a little bit. You don't have to call yourself a vegan with a capital V to do vegan stuff or to make those choices. So there's the behaviour, and then there's the identity. And you don't have to identify with vegans or veganism in order to be a vegan. You just have to not do stuff, to not exploit animals, not eat animals, not choose meat or dairy, not be influenced by all of these pressures that are put on us constantly through society. So to normalise veganism means to take, I think, the capital V out of veganism and just veganism is a behaviour, not a thing you suddenly become overnight. When we get to that stage, that will be the biggest barrier. removed. And I think to a certain extent vegans shooting themselves in the foot slightly by identifying so strongly with veganism and other vegans. Just need to do that behaviour rather than be that thing. It's a bit convoluted, but
You spoke a lot about people's behaviours and their actions. So do you think people should be more aware of their behaviours, and maybe do you believe in like non-violence to all human beings and all animals?
Yeah, so I've looked into many religions, and I consider everyone on a path. I'm not religious, I'm an atheist, and I believe in scientific skepticism. That's not for a rejection of religions, it's just for an adaptation of some of the principles of science. I'm claiming that answers all the questions to every spiritual, religious or whatever question out there. One of the big principles that comes out of some of the earlier religions, even those that precede religions like Hinduism and Buddhism, is a religion called Jainism, which is actually a very small religion, but one of the oldest, and one that also contributes to the most academic texts historically. So without sort of going into the history of that, one of their principles is a thing called ahimsa, which is non-violence. And although I'm not religious in the sense that I have this as a religious doctrine or a belief system in that way, I think it's a really powerful guiding principle for a person to proceed on their own personal pathway, journey, if you like, without getting too spiritual and all that. So this principle of non-violence leads you to question all actions to all other people, including oneself. And if you live by that rule, it means thinking about the consequences of one's actions. Of course that means not killing animals for food, but it also means treating other people how you want to be treated yourself. It's like the golden rule, isn't it? So this principle of non-violence permeates all levels of society, and if we all chose to adopt that, or even move towards non-violence, I think the world would be a better place, a more compassionate place, and a healthier place too.
Do you think it's a realistic aim to have?
Yeah, I do, yeah, absolutely. There is, probably being a little controversial, but there is a place for violence in the world, and we should be able to use violence in an appropriate way. Self-defense obviously is one of the ways that we need to use that sometimes. We are inherently violent beings. We've evolved through our ability to kill other things. There's no doubting that. We've also got a great evolved capacity for love and compassion. And we've evolved to a point where we can make realistic choices about how we behave in the world towards ourselves and other people and animals. Because we have that, given the knowledge of being able to adopt a non-violent perspective on the world, not having to kill animals for food, because we don't, actually we're more healthy for it. Given that knowledge, the choice that we can lead really, really healthy lives more compassionately without doing any of that killing or any of that violence, knowing that there's a choice to be made, whether you proceed with a life of violence in those choices, or you proceed in a life of compassion and non-violence where appropriate. And of course you have to take the common sense view. It's not appropriate all the time to do all of these things and be an advocate for it all, but you can make little changes, in the things you buy, the way you speak to people, the amount of time you give to listen to someone, in their time of need. So compassion, I think, is really, really important in everything we do. Even in the strong choices about when not to oppose things. So yeah, it's a guiding principle which I've personally found helpful, but other systems of spiritual belief also latch on to or use as they see fit. So there's a whole reading in that direction that spins out of veganism for me. So for me, veganism is a state of being that comes as a consequence of things like that, rather than I'm a vegan because I love animals, or I'm a vegan because I want the health benefits, or I'm a vegan because I was brought up in a culture that supports that, or not, or this happened to me and led to veganism. for me it's a pathway to a more mature, knowledgeable way of being, which hopefully more and more people are choosing to adopt.
Do you think compassion should be taught in schools or like help to be developed?
I think it is. I think it's normally taught from our parents who love us. So the cuddles and the hugs and the kisses and the kind words. Children are naturally, inherently compassionate, especially to animals. And that's why they get into liking puppies and cuddly kittens and things like this. And they would get into liking cuddly cows and cuddly pigs and cuddly lambs. Except society sections off cats and dogs for pets, and cows and pigs and poultry, all of these other animals for food. And so there comes a point where they go out of the picture, and they're not in the storybooks, and they're isolated from that compassionate approach. So you still get the cuddly toys, but you don't get the story of actually what happens to them. So we see that evidence today in things like the reaction of the Western world to the Chinese Yulin Dog Festival, where they're eating hundreds of thousands of dogs en masse and stringing them up as if we would cows or factory farmed animals for our own consumption. And the backlash to those pictures that have come through social media has been insane. People say, how can you do this to dogs? When the reality is they're animals the same as other animals like cows and lambs and poultry. For me there's no difference, and for everyone I think we should take stock of the fact that, well, why is killing and eating a dog any different from killing and eating a pig or a chicken, whatever it might be. So we need to question these things. We need to look just one level behind all of the media hype and the industry, the meat and dairy industry, the sugar, the processed foods in our supermarkets. All of this is constant pressure, a marketed pressure to make money. So without being too much of a militant there, and I'm not, there is a knowledge to be had from which a balanced view can be formed. When one has that knowledge, without of the marketing spin, the hype, the bias, when you truly see both sides of the story, for me the logical choice, the compassionate choice, just a common sense choice is a vegan lifestyle, where you get the benefits of all of this. But you have to be at that point. You spoke of the tipping point, didn't you? Where society might move to having a vegan lifestyle as the norm. I strongly believe that will be the case in the future. We're not there yet. Until that happens, hundreds of billions of animals are going to die until we're there. There will come a point where that doesn't have to happen. I don't know when that will be. I think that will happen. Just the economy of scale of the population explosion, and there's tons of arguments behind it.
So you're a psychologist, and there's been lots of animal research and testing in the psychology field. Do you support and promote that in this day and age?
No, I don't, no. We're well beyond that. Some of that is really, really cruel, especially with primates. It's a difficult topic to get into because some of the fundamentals of psychology have been based on those very early studies. Some of the primate research has underpinned some of the current day textbooks and the knowledge we have today. But the point I'm trying to make is today, in today's society, we don't need that kind of stuff to be happening. You don't need to find out about that kind of thing anymore. We've kind of like run enough rats through mazes, kept enough chimpanzees in cages. We want to know about humans in psychology. So our best participants are humans. There is a brand of psychology called comparative psychology, which deals with the comparisons between animals and the way they are and the way humans are. That's not, as far as I'm aware, that cutting edge. And although I'm not an expert in the field, it doesn't ring true with me. I find that repulsive. Much the same as doing animal experiments on mice or rats to test makeup production and so on and so forth. I'm not coming down as a hardline animal rights person, but if you don't take a stand on it, you're kind of in that grey area, and so everyone should know where they stand on those issues, I think. So, yeah, man up. Make a statement, psychologists.
So researchers seem to keep discovering that animals have emotions and empathy for other animals.
Yeah.
Do you think that's surprising?
No, when we keep cats and dogs and all manner of fluffy things as pets, that's precisely the reason. To a degree, we've selectively bred them to have those qualities, to be fluffy, to stand up on two legs and beg for food, or to mimic human reactions and emotions. But of course they have feelings, and they can connect on that level because they've evolved to have these qualities. We have as well. We bond with our children and to our parents via these systems. They have survival value to us, so we've evolved. Our brains are wired that way. We are entirely set up as feeling beings. It serves a definite purpose in our evolution, and that's the case for most of the animals, the mammals. They have this system, central nervous system, with these parts of the brains that are responsible for feeling and affect. So yeah, is it surprising that they have the same systems that we do? They get depressed, that they get sad, they have capacity for compassion to their offspring, that they are incredibly distressed when their babies are taken away from them. Is that surprising? No, absolutely not. But yet, for some animals, we kind of tend to forget that. Pigs and cows and poultry. Kind of, no, that's anonymized. But for dogs and cats and fluffy things, why should they be more in tune with their emotions? Kind of, when you get to stick insects, you got to draw a line somewhere, right? Mate, what's wrong with stick insects loving each other? But you got to have a common sense kind of line on this. You get to a point where there's less of that capacity. Yeah. Certainly for humans, we may have more of that than other animals, but that's not to say that other animals are devoid of these things. Absolutely not. There's inherent survival value in having these systems, so they do exist and they do feel pain, emotional pain as well. We shouldn't play on that too much, because then the anti-argument to that is, well, what about frogs, or what about this or that, and that's just going down that argument where it becomes irrelevant. But it is still relevant to us when we're treating animals inhumanely and they're feeling these things. So, in terms of animal rights, I think this is important to bear in mind and not to shut away.
So what influenced you to become vegan?
I was, like many other people, vegetarian for a number of years, 15 years or so, and ethically, I had a really horrible diet whilst I was a vegetarian, and I was one of these snack food vegetarians, so I'd avoid meat, but I'd wear leather, and I'd eat cheese. Oh God, I love cheese. I love cheese. And I would eat it, and you know how bad that is for you. And one of the things I realised was the cruelty involved in dairy. And when I educated myself about that, about the male chicks and about cows and what happens in these warehouses and the way they're treated, and the way we extract milk, and actually how we don't really need milk, and why should we be drinking milk? So when I educated myself, I found that, I don't need any of that stuff, and that went over the point at which I accepted veganism as that's the best way. And actually, when I did it, it wasn't hard in the slightest. Actually, I think it was easier. My diet, it was just so much healthier for it, because I cut out all of those processed foods as far as possible. And I found that, wow, actually, fruit and veg this is great, you know. And that was just going from vegetarianism to veganism. I think more than anything that made the change. So it wasn't that I had a massive epiphany, sort of the ethics changed or anything. It was just education, really. Yeah. And then after that point, I started reading books, you know, the China Study and all of the well-known authors, and Michael Greger, the nutritionist on YouTube. Fantastic videos, very informative, sort of pint-sized, snappy stuff you can take stock of. And then, of course, Gary Yourofsky. Really extreme views, but a really powerful argument as well, highly influential. Although I might not agree with everything he says, watch his videos, all right, and then judge it for yourself, and then take a choice. So many factors. It's a really powerful thing in a person's life to change to vegetarianism, but it's even more powerful to change to veganism. Once you do that, the world kind of opens up, and you get more knowledge about marketing, processing of foods, what's actually going on around that's hidden from us. Once we have that knowledge and we make that choice, I think that empowers us in many other areas of our life.
So, do you have any tips for people that want to go vegan?
Yeah, well, I've watched many of your videos, and I thank you for making these videos, by the way. I think you're doing a great job. The tips that come out typically are things like, well, do it slowly, or start with this, or start with that. But I say, when you wake up in the morning, you're a vegan. When you wake up every single morning, you're already a vegan. Unless you go to bed in sort of leather pajamas or something, or wake up, you know, and suddenly eat it. Every morning you wake up, you're already a vegan. It's your choices that make you not a vegan.
Yeah.
So the natural way to be is a vegan. It's only until you eat a bacon sandwich or pull on that leather jacket or whatever it might be, then you choose not to be a vegan. So the default position is already veganism. So just bear that in mind in the choices that you're faced with each day, and take responsibility for that. If you're not comfortable with doing that, even if it's a little thought in the back of your mind, question why you do that. And if that little voice in the back of your mind is still there after you've thought about it some more, listen to it a bit more, and maybe when you wake up, maybe a week or a month from now, you know, you won't have that bacon sandwich, or you won't pull on that leather jacket, or you'll view animals differently. Or it might change your entire life, who knows? It might be a little change, it might be a big change. Everyone's different. But just being in touch with yourself and knowing how you respond to these choices that you make, I think is really, really important.
That's really good. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.